Hi guys, it is Friday the 8th of April, and I have a very special friend. An amazing brother in Christ that's been in our family for, 20 years, maybe 22. Been a while. He's been an evangelist. He has gone to other countries and preached the gospel, and he's just an amazing man of God. And when he gets here, we're going to be talking about some of the things that are affecting our country right now, which I'll have to say, we're in a huge battle with Satan. Witchcraft and Satanism is being taught to our kids. I mean, even in schools, they're having kids read Harry Potter. I was at Walmart one time about, 10 years ago? No, 18 years ago. And there was a woman who was looking at Harry Potter books, and I told her, I said, those teach children witchcraft. She said, well, we need some prizes for kids in Sunday school. I said, you don't introduce that to kids in Sunday school. That's a how-to book for witchcraft and Satanism. And she walked away. And I walked down a few aisles and I came back up. A minute, 2 minutes later, and she's back over there looking at the Harry Potter books. And I told her, I said, you will be judged if you take those books into church and introduce them to children that are there to learn about Jesus Christ. And then she put the book down and walked away. And I didn't see her go back, but I'm sure she did go back later. Now, Brother Brian and I, we went to the same Walmart store one day, and we were just walking around, and there was a woman in front of us that had a hijab on, and she was walking kind of fast. And we were talking, and she was darting left and right like she was trying to get away from us, but she couldn't figure out which way to go. And we just kept walking and laughing. And finally she took off to the left and never came back. But this is my brother Brian, and we thought it would be awesome to talk to y'all about, well, let's start with the Harry Potter books. Brian told me this morning that he had taken it upon himself to watch the whole series. And Brian, I'll let you explain how you know what you know and what you learned from those movies and how you think the outcome should be for our children to keep them from falling into it.
Yes, I guess you'd probably want to know a little bit about my background and how I come to the opinion that I have regarding this matter. But I was raised in California. Went through foster home after foster home after foster home. Eventually, I was adopted by a family in California. After having had been adopted by this family in California, during my younger years, while having had been through the foster care system multiple years, even after having been adopted, went back into the foster care system. Anyhow, so I went through the system to live, and at some point during the time that I had been adopted, I ended up leaving that home and started running the streets and started living on the streets in downtown LA. Started out there kind of off in Skid Row area, and found out real quickly that was not a safe place for me at the age that I had gone down there. And everybody around me at that time was like trying to get me out of there too.
Do you want to share why you left that home situation?
Well, I mean, I had left that home situation. I had actually run away from that adopted home several times before I actually made it out of there. And every time that I had ran away, The cops brought me back, but they had never asked the parents or anybody there at the house why this child kept running away from home. So there was no help for me. I was left, had no voice, had no way to express that I had been being abused by this family that had adopted me. The abuse that I experienced was multiple levels of abuse. We're talking about physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, any way that you can abuse a person, a child. I experienced it, and I would never wish abuse on anybody, and especially not a child. And well, there was no help for me at that time. So at that certain age, I believe it was about 13, I'm going to say 13, almost 14 years old, where I finally left that house and was out on my own. Took a bicycle and rode that bicycle from East Los Angeles and rode all the way into Hollywood, California on a bicycle all by myself. And that was quite a trip.
Sounds like it.
So finally, when I arrived in Hollywood, it was like, every runaway's dream, right? Like, you had everything, the stars, the glitter, the lights, the fame, the name, you're downtown Hollywood, California, you see it all there, right? So everything and anything is available at your disposal. So anyhow, I ended up getting caught up with some people that were running the streets there in downtown Hollywood. Hollywood dogs is what they called the homeless people that banded together to take care of each other, that ran the streets. All the young people, all the older people, there were some veteran people, but there was a tight knit group of people that took care of each other living on the streets here.
Yeah.
So some of the young people, some of the older veterans that had been living on the streets in Hollywood, California, they would actually encourage younger people to go through some of the shelters and programs that they had there, because they weren't trying to get them kids to get caught up in the whole mess they were caught up in, but yet they were there. So but everybody pulled resources together to try to help each other. So anyhow, it was during that time that I had gotten introduced to some dark arts. It wasn't necessarily Satanism at that moment, but the introduction of it was satanic in nature, and had gotten involved in this group that had recruited me, and I started meeting with them regularly. And let's see, I can give the whole backstory, but I'm going to try to condense it. So got involved in this group and started moving up the ranks, so to speak. Got involved in stuff as far as even palm reading, tarot card reading. On that level is what I had gotten involved with. That's my introduction to the whole thing. Started experiencing magic, things of that nature. There was one time when I was in one of the ritual ceremonies that we had participated in, seeing a man physically lifted up by an unseen force and thrown through a brick wall.
Jeez.
And come out whole on the other side, completely bloodied and bruised, but alive. And having spiritually, physically, however you want to say it, seeing that with my own eyes. At that time, I was not on drugs. I was in a somewhat sober mind, and seeing that happen in front of me, it was exhilarating. It was exciting. It was like, wow, this is like hardcore right here. This is really this kind of stuff I need this to survive for my life, right? So as a young person, I was full of hatred, anger, bitterness. I was a very angry person. I had been given up for adoption, didn't know my mom, didn't know my dad, didn't know anything about any family members, anything. The people that did call me their family, that were the adopted parents, they didn't really treat me like a child, right? Like you would think a child should be treated. So I hated my life. I hated everything about living. And even as a youth, before I had ran away from that home, I had counted many times where I had tried to kill myself as a child in elementary school, in middle school, in junior high, trying to kill myself because of the pain that had been brought into my life of having experienced no family, no mother, no father,
Yeah.
and things.
And you had a foster parent that broke your leg because they wanted to see what it was like to break a kid's leg?
Yes, yes.
And you still have scars from the burns from their cigarettes on your legs.
And that also plays into part of the testimonial, if you will. Skipping ahead to that part. So recently, probably within the last 3-4 years or something, I come across I took a DNA test and came across a cousin who was in a different part of the country. I am living at that time in the West Coast, and this person was living in Ohio. Had taken a DNA test, checked some stuff out on it. 6 months goes by, hadn't heard anything. Try to reach out to people that said that they were, relatives of this, that, or the other, and reached out. Nobody really said anything, and it's like, oh, cool, yeah, all right, hi. It's like, yeah, this is really getting nowhere. So 6 months goes by. I get a message back from somebody in Ohio who says, hi, my name is Brian. I live in Dayton, Ohio. I know all of my family, and they all live here in Ohio. Who are you and where are you at? That's the message that was sent to me in my email. So I replied back. I said who I was, gave a little bit of my backstory, what I knew anyway. Person calls me back and tells me that he had been named after me by his mother, and his mother having to have been an aunt or whatever. He says, you'll need to talk to my mom. She'll fill you in on some of the details. So anyway, I actually called him. He gave me his number. I called him. He gets his mom on a three-way on the phone, and she starts telling me some things, and she talked about some of the scars that I had on my body that nobody but me at that time had known about. And I was thinking to myself, for her to have said this information that only I know, for sure this has got to be some legit information. So anyhow, this aunt ends up telling me that I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, where a couple of them had been looking for me for a little while. Anyway, that's how I ended up finally coming into knowing a little bit about the actual biological portion of my family history. I had already known about it spiritually speaking, by the spirit. I had already known. I had known my mom's name. I had a vision of her. I seen her in the spirit, so I had already known what she looked like. So when I saw a picture of her, I already knew who she was, and I already knew the story of why she gave me up. So I had it took me a long many years to get over that pain and to get healed internally, but I finally did get healed of what brought that about, that pain. When I had come and been in Ohio previous to having did the DNA test, I had been living in Columbus, Ohio, and so years goes by after that, living in Columbus, coming back to the Oregon, West Coast area, living in Oregon, and then I did the DNA test. When I did finally meet up with that family, that aunt ends up telling me, in the year that I had been in Columbus, Ohio, she says in that year, the year that she named, that was the year that I was in Columbus, and she said that her sister, which would have been my mom, had told her sister, which is the aunt, that my mom had said to her sister, my aunt, had said to her, I just saw Brian at the gas station in Columbus, Ohio.
And that's when you and I were out for a ride.
And we had been out, yes. In fact, I think we went to one of
White Castles.
Yes. So it was during that time that she had seen me, and everything started clicking, and I started thinking, yes, I do remember that situation, but I was so zoned in at that time that I wouldn't have been aware of that For all I know, I could have been looking directly at her at that moment, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was interesting how that had come about, and that during that time she actually had seen me, and she had not seen me in so many years. How are you going to know me? How are you going to know, right? But you know how they say, a mom always knows. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess wrapping all that up, so living in Hollywood on the streets, got involved in this group, seeing some things happen, go down. So here I was exposed to this supernatural type of powers happening around me. It was pretty exciting, you know, able to, you're free to do whatever you want. It's free to be you, free to do whatever you want. That is really what
That was your gateway drug into
absolutely,
it. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, you know, when you start really breaking down Satanism in its core, one of the core elements of teaching of Satanism is that it's all about self, self love, self hate, self anything to do with self.
Yeah.
So of course I was all about self. You know, I'm given this
Well,
opportunity.
nobody'd ever been about you before,
Right.
except you. So
Right.
that's all you knew.
So
Survival.
This fits right up my alley, right?
Right.
So seeing all these things happen. Well, I also remember another time in one of those ritual ceremonies that I had been involved in. This one particular time I had just gotten through in a ritual. The leader of this group is in the middle of this room. If I'm looking at this house, so he's in the middle of this room and he's doing his thing. Everybody's surrounded in this big old circle. Some of them are sitting in chairs, some of them are not. And then you have this leader who is off to the side here in the middle, and all of a sudden, like the devil had possessed him.
Ooh.
And this satanic, dark, evil, I can't even describe the voice. I mean, I can hear it, but I can't hear, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it was bow down and worship me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this really evil, wicked sounding voice. And just as I'm getting ready to bow down and do what I'm doing, right, all of a sudden this bright light passes through the room. And I'm looking up and it's like almost blinding light. I'm looking around the room. Everybody around me is blinded.
Wow.
And I'm freaking out, like, what's going on? And when I saw this light happen and this presence come by me, and I look, and there was this big, tall angel, and turns to me and says, "You will bow down and worship nobody but the Lord thy God."
Whew. Hallelujah. I got Holy Ghost bumps.
And then as soon as those words had been said, that light, that fast, disappears.
Oof.
And I look around, and people are like bewildered, like not knowing what's happening
What
around
just
them, just like, what just happened? And everybody in there is like almost in a state of chaos now. It's like two spiritual forces had just collided.
Wow.
Literally.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, this man comes in there and he's like loud and bubbly and carrying this Bible in his hand.
So he just like burst through the front
And
door.
he just walked in and walked right into, well, I mean, so to get up to where we were at, you'd have to walk through this bottom floor, walk up these stairs, come around a section, and come into a room that was on another floor. And this man, he walks up in there carrying his Bible, walks into that room where we're at, and he's like full of boldness, like not caring, right? You know how they say zero whatever given? This dude, he had zero care given, and he come right on up in there, and he comes right up to him and he points his finger and he says, "The blood of Jesus Christ cleanses you from all your sin."
Whew.
And as soon as he said that, I felt demons screaming out of me. And people around there was some manifestations too that was going on. And he just turned around and he walks right on out. And nobody did a thing to him. All of a sudden, chaos and confusion, violence started breaking out all over the place. People started fighting. People started screaming, running out of the house.
Now, what was the original intention of this gathering of these people before all this happened?
To be honest, at that time, I'm not sure what we were doing. Remember, I had just recently at that time gotten recruited into this group, so I was just learning some of the ways that they were doing things. My guess is at that time what they were doing was just how should I put this, like
A sacrifice?
no, they were doing some kind of like spirit networking is
Okay.
that's
Okay.
the only way I could describe it, where they all link up in the spirit to join forces.
Yeah.
That's what that part was all about. And then eventually it would get into other stuff. But usually when it comes to sacrifice and stuff like that, it's not going to be in like an abandoned house. They have some very specific locations where they would do that. I wasn't in that location.
So basically, Satan came into the house. Then Jesus came into the
showed up.
house.
That's right.
And then the demons started fighting against themselves
That's right.
in the enemy's camp.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so that man, Deaver, he leaves that building, the house that we're at, the abandoned house. And as soon as he left, and chaos is ensuing all over the place, people fighting, craziness is ensuing. I didn't know what was going on. I remember that I had walked out of that room and I turned around and I just punched a hole through that wall. Like, I don't know what was going on. I was just freaked out. Everybody was freaked out. And as soon as I had punched that wall, here come in the police. And they were arresting everybody that was in that house because we weren't supposed to be in that house. So anyhow, they arrested everybody. They handcuffed everybody. There were cars all over down there, outside, lined up. People were getting arrested, handcuffed, put in cars, drove off. And then finally there was another car down at the corner and around the corner on the other side, actually on the main Hollywood Boulevard, because this house was right off Hollywood Boulevard, off of one of the side streets. So the cops had handcuffed me and were walking me to the corner and then made a right. Their car was parked on the side of that street there. As I had been handcuffed, they had put me in the back seat. I'm sitting in the back seat all handcuffed. First cop gets in the driver's side. The next cop gets in the passenger side. They're both sitting in there. The driver gets in. The cop who was driving, he gets in. He's doing some stuff on the computer. Whatever he's doing. And he gets ready to put the vehicle in gear. The second cop, who's sitting in the passenger seat, they both look at each other and they're just like scratching their heads, like they're not sure what's going on, like something had just happened, like this bubble of like alternate reality occurred. Just like things just won't changed. And they scratched their head, looked at each other like, what's going on here? They got out of the car, they came around to the back of the cop car,